I'm on a journey to recreating the entirety of Hypixel Skywars with commands. In the last episode, we added key features like adding spectator mode when a player dies, as well as kill recognition when a player is killed. If you haven't seen it, it's not absolutely necessary, but I'll still link it if you want to go watch that first. Today, we'll be focusing on some more fun stuff, so make sure to stick around. Okay, so the first thing that I want to work on today is making it so that projectiles like snowballs, fishing rods, and eggs deal knockback towards players. Now, as you can see from the clip on screen, in regular Skywars, when you hit a player with a projectile, it does knockback to them. This is useful in getting players into combos. But at some point in the last 7 years, this feature was actually completely removed. So as you can see, if I try and use a snowball, an egg, or even a fishing rod, it does no knockback to the player. So the problem here is that we need to give the player a knockback from a specific direction whenever they get hit by a projectile. And there aren't very many artificial ways to give knockback to a player, but one way that I did find is using arrows. So we can summon an arrow with a custom motion. So for example, if I use this command, we can summon an arrow that's flying towards us. Now the problem with this method is that arrows deal damage to the player, whereas the projectiles that we want to use don't. Now there is a damage indicator on an arrow that will specify how much damage it does. So if we summon an arrow with the damage set to, let's say, 0.1, it still deals half a heart. So there are two main solutions that I could think of here. The first one, which is the most obvious, is to give the player resistance. So if you don't know, resistance is a status effect that you can get from beacons. And if I give myself a certain level of resistance, I just won't take any damage at all. So if I was to give myself resistance on the same tick that the arrow hits me and then remove it immediately after, then in theory I shouldn't take any damage from the arrow. And while that might work, I think I did come up with a better solution. Alright, so I've been working on this for around 2.5 hours, and I'm gonna be honest, it is frazzling my brain, so I'm gonna do the lazy thing and say I'll come back to this in a future episode. So for now, let's just work on the next thing. So the next thing I want to work on is something a little bit more fun and less difficult, which I'm all for after that massive session of brain frazzling. So if you don't know, in most Hypixel games, there's a bunch of cosmetics you can do. And in PvP related games, one of those cosmetics is making it so that when you kill a player, a certain thing happens. So for example, there might be a cosmetic lightning strike at the player's position, there might be a temporary snow globe around them, it might have a blood explosion, or a squid might even pop up from their location and soar into the sky. Now, because we're only recreating the actual game and not the lobby, which is where you would normally choose your cosmetics, I think we'll just make it so that it randomly selects a cosmetic whenever you kill a player. So I'm trying to add the lightning, but it's actually proving to be kind of difficult. So as you can see, if I kill the player with the lightning effect selected, then it does actually work, and we do get a lightning strike. So everything seems to be good here, right? Well, not exactly. If we do the exact same thing but in survival mode, we actually take a lot of damage from the lightning. And along with that, all the items the player had on them are also immediately destroyed because of the lightning. Now, obviously this is a big problem because A, you don't get any of the player's loot, and I'm also pretty sure that lightning deals true damage, which means that armor has no effect on it. I guess one way that we could solve this is by summoning the lightning a little bit below where it actually needs to be, because obviously lightning strikes down and you can see it all the way up and down. So if we could strike it below where it needs to be, maybe we'll still get the same effect, while the blast radius would be too low for it to actually do any damage. Let me try that instead. Okay, so I've set the blast radius to about 5 blocks lower, so let's see if this works now. We still take a little bit of damage, but we took a lot less damage, and the lightning strike still looked absolutely perfect. So I'm gonna try it with like maybe 7 blocks lower, and maybe that'll work better. Alright, it's now 7 blocks lower, so let's see if this works. As you can see, we still got a tiny bit of lightning damage there. Now it's 10 blocks lower, so everything should be good now. There we go, we got all the lightning and none of the damage. That's absolutely perfect. Okay, so the next skill effect that I want to add is really random, but I also think that it's pretty funny, so we're gonna do it. Basically, when you kill a player, it just rains down beef, leather, and cooked beef on their location. Now, there's a couple ways that I could do this. The first way, which would also be the most annoying, but also the most controllable, is to manually summon each piece of beef, leather, and cooked beef with a specific motion. So that way we can control exactly where each one is going. But then again, there's also no random elements in that, which I kind of don't like. One much better, more efficient, and randomized way to do this would be to have a chest like this, full of all of the items that we have, and then we break it with a command in the same tick that we place it, so then it just basically rains down beef everywhere. The problem with that is that all the items would then stack with each other. So I think we can get around that by naming each of them a different name. Okay, so with this ridiculously long command right here, it should set a chest full of beef. There we go, so we got the chest. And as you can see, it has a bunch of different beef, leather, and steak, and they're all named different stuff so they won't stack when we break it. Alright, so now I've fully implemented it, so when we kill a player, it can sometimes rain down beef. And as you saw there, after a couple seconds, the beef will disappear. And the way that I made it so that you can't just pick up the item and run away with it is by setting the item's pickup delay NBT data to a really high number, so that way the game thinks that it's just been dropped. So the next kill effect that I want to add is one called Tornado. And what it does is it spawns a tornado with some dragon flap sounds at the player's location. And the tornado is accomplished by using pillars of smoke particles in rings, so it looks like a tornado effect. So let me explain this the best that I can. Basically, we have a bunch of different entities stacked on top of each other. So we have one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. And they're all spinning around in a circle. And then we use a command to set particles in front of them. So on the bottom, we set it maybe one block in front of it. So that means that there's a circle of smoke. Hey, editing Dukky here. I realized that I was talking about this part for way too long, so let's just skip to the part where I actually finish the thing. Anyways, we eventually did get it working, so here's the finished product. I think it looks really good and is definitely distinguishable as a tornado. Okay, so next up, I want to add one that I actually mentioned when I was explaining what the kill effects are. And that's the Squid missile. And basically what it does is it spawns a squid with levitation that flies up over their head for about 5 seconds before popping off in a colorful explosion. So this one should be pretty easy to implement, so I'll bring you guys back once it's done. And a pretty short time later, it's all finished. So as you can see, if we kill the squid, we get an exploding squid that goes off into the sky. Hey, quick intermission. I promise this won't take long, so don't skip it. But I have a Patreon. I made a Patreon account. I'm currently not monetized on YouTube, so I have no way of getting paid for these contraptions that I spend literally hundreds of hours on. So if you guys want to support me, or if you want to play them for yourself, go over to my Patreon. You can currently download the Mario Kart one and the Bedrock items in Java one, and I'll put on the Skywars one there as well once I've finished it. So yeah, the link's in the description. Anyways, back to the video. So this last one is actually something I had the idea for that isn't in the Hypixel Skywars one, but I think would make a really cool addition. So my idea is to have hundreds of thousands of purple particles explode out from the player going in all directions. And as well as that, we'll also have an Enderman sound, and I think combined with that, it'll look really cool and magical, almost like the player is exploding into purple dust. And now that it's all implemented, I think that it definitely didn't turn out as good as I was expecting, but I think it's definitely still good enough for me to accept as a new feature into the game. So as you can see, the particles sort of disappear, and they don't do this every time, but every so often they will disappear like that. Usually they'll go a lot farther before disappearing. But either way, I think it still looks pretty cool. Alright, the last thing that I want to work on today is adding in the build height. So basically it goes like this. When you build up a certain number of blocks, to prevent people from just going all the way up to the build limit, and this is even more pressing in the newest update now that the build limit is way higher than it was before, we can go all the way up like 300 more blocks before we hit a barrier. So to prevent people from doing that, the idea is that Skywars has a build limit, so you can't build higher than a certain height. Okay, so with just a little bit more finicking, I've made it so that now you can't place any blocks above the build limit. So if we try and build up, as you can see, they just get instantly deleted and put back into your inventory. And I've even added protection against placing blocks really fast and placing them on the second layer by accident, like this. As you can see, it destroys all blocks above the build limit. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching the second episode of my Breaking Skywars with Command series. If you did enjoy this episode, please subscribe, and without further ado, I'll let you guys jam out to some outro music.